Record to the cloud. Great day, everyone. My name is Angela Medeiros. I'm a partner here with Zinzino, and we are here to talk about today a disruptor in the nutraceutical space that's doing some great things with omega and putting people in balance. And I would like to introduce our guest speaker today. Actually, Dr. Colin Robertson. He holds a PhD in exercise physiology and brings over 30 years of experience in clinical exercise physiology. He is a registered nutritionist in and an accredited strength and conditioning coach through the UKSCA, which is one of the most respected governing bodies in performance and clinical conditioning. Dr. Robertson, and please mute yourself if you haven't muted yourself too, please. So Dr. Robertson has dedicated his career to bridge the gap between science and practical applications, helping practitioners understand how physiology, nutrition, and evidence-based protocols can profoundly impact patient outcome. His background in clinical exercise and physiology gives him a unique lens into metabolic health, inflammation, and cardiovascular performance and cellular function, areas that are fundamental when we discuss omega-3 balance and long-term health optimization. What I appreciate most about Dr. Robertson is his ability to take complex biochemical science and translate it into actionable, measurable strategies that clinicians can confidently implement in practices. And today, he will be sharing insights into science behind omega balance and the importance of testing rather than guessing. And so it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Colin Robertson. Thank you so much for taking your time, Doctor. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here and to chat. And now I've got a good idea of what we're going to chat about. So that's always really useful too. So hello, everybody. I can see some familiar faces and some faces I've never seen before. And it's always interesting listening to someone read your biography, kind of, because it's probably not how I'd put it. I've really spent the last 30 years. I always describe my career as helping everybody go from the hospital bed all the way through to standing on top of the highest point in the world, on top of Mount Everest. Because I've been very privileged in as much that I've worked clinically when it comes to multiple different types of pathology and musculoskeletal. I've worked in high performance sport. I'm an environmental physiologist. So when people decide to climb Everest, row across the oceans and things, people like me get involved so that they don't just survive, but actually they perform really, really well, and they hit the target, they get the results they want from it. And throughout of all of that experience, and even the experience of the last few years of working with Zinzino, what I've realized is that there's more and more common ground than there are things that separate it. Humans are phenomenal, and whilst we are complex, and I'll get to that in a moment, there are real obvious pathways of simplicity. And I think sometimes myself, I've been guilty of this in the past. And I think sometimes we are as professionals guilty of perhaps overcomplicating things when in reality we just need to reduce them down to simple component parts. And so hopefully I'll do a little bit of that with you today as we discuss the omega-3, omegas, polyunsaturated fatty acids factor when it comes to human health. Because that's one of the most targetable lines of action we can take when it comes to this notion of actually nurturing human health. So before I go any further, and I apologize if this is patronizing to anybody, and I certainly don't mean to be, but I want to make something clear. And in fact, wherever I go in the world now, when I do a presentation, I'm starting with this next piece because it's important that we are looking at things in a similar way. But first of all, you are not a thing. And that might sound strange. You know, you're a human. You are a person in the world, but you're not a thing. My computer is a thing. This desk is a thing. Humans are actually a collection, a very sophisticated collection of processes. That's what we are really. We are a systems in action. And this is where we get to a fundamental of biology, which is what we call homeostasis. And homeostasis is just balance. That's all you need to think of. The human biology, biochemistry is all based on balance. And I've noticed in recent terms that sometimes when people want to delve into a conversation about human systems, they will jump straight into biochemistry. And I want to simplify something there. Biochemistry is literally if I look at one direction, I'm looking at one thing in one direction. Biology is when I look at things as a system. And when it comes to the human, it can be really interesting to look at one part. It can be really interesting. And we go, okay, we understand this. But we should never sacrifice the biology part, the systems part, because nothing in the human body works in isolation. Everything is working in finely tuned balance with each other. And our whole body, every aspect of it, is based off different types of ratio. The one I'm going to focus on in the time we have this morning, I'm still getting, I only arrived in Dallas last night. The time difference is still catching up with me. The one I'm going to look at is omega-3, omega-6, and the ratio of those, what that means from a cellular point of view. But later on today, I'm going to be talking about dietary fibers. I'm going to be talking about the gut and the gut matrix and the ratios that take place there. I could be having a conversation with you about nootropics and looking at the ratios across the blood-brain barrier. Biology is systems, and systems rely on balance. And when there is an imbalance, we have a problem. And that's true in every aspect of life. You don't need to have a PhD or a medical degree or any type of degree to understand the essence of balance because you are a living example of balance. When you stand up from a chair, when you walk down the sidewalk, you are a system in action, mastering the art of balance. And everything we see from a climate point of view, environmental point of view, it's balance. So whenever there's a deficiency, and I want if you remember nothing else of what I talk about in the next however long, just remember this. Whenever there is a deficiency when it comes to nutrition, whether it's omega-3, whether it's a fiber, whether it's a type of vitamin or mineral, what you do is you compromise how well a process can take place. And by compromising how well a process can take place, you alter the dynamics of balance. Something else has to adjust. Something has to accommodate that. And the thing is, like most balancing acts, you can get by for so long, but eventually a lack of balance will lead to a compromise. And that's true of any type of process or structure. The problem with humans, and I often describe myself as a philosopher first. I'm a philosopher and I'm a scientist. The problems with humans is that so long as we're getting away with something, we don't think there's a problem. We go, I'm okay. Actually, you're telling me this information, but I'm okay. But we're only okay for as long as we're getting away with it. And the problem that we have right now, it's an interesting time to be alive. I'm really paying attention and taking it all in, is that we've reached the critical mass of a certain route we've taken when it comes to our society and our food behavior. We are the ones, and I can see faces here in different age groups. We are the ones who either approximately midway, speaking for myself, and some later on, inherited the huge industrialization of food. And if I'd been having this conversation 2 years ago, what I'm about to say would have sounded like a conspiracy theory. But now I've been on your government website this morning. It's now a part of your legislate. You are so on board with this in the US. You are leading the way. We know that ultra processed foods create huge deficiencies. They are highly addictive and they are directly consequential when it comes to achieving poor health. We know that now. There's no argument to be had. Don't care who you are, what you think you know, how long you got away with something. That is a fact. That's as much of a fact as if we were going to discuss smoking or excessive alcohol use. So we know that that's a problem. But the problem we have, unlike smoking and excessive alcohol consumption, is 65 to 80% of our diet has been made up of these foods for now well over 50, 60, 70 years. And what that's led to is key fundamental deficiencies. What that led to? A lack of balance, a compromise to processes. And I want you to remember all of this because beneath the skin, and in fact, the skin itself, there is constant change manufactured 24 hours a day. Every single second of every single minute of every single hour of every single day, there is constant change going on. And you are the captain of your ship. You are the person who gets to determine which direction you go in. You are the one who makes the choices. And the choices you make can either contribute towards the optimization of those processes, choosing those waters that are safest to travel, the smoothest, the clearest ones with the wind in your sail, or you can veer left and you can start to go towards the stormy seas. And for a while, you'll cope. But like any good sailor will tell you, before too long, if you remain in troubled waters, the boat will capsize and sink. And that's the way to think about it. One of the fundamental things, and I didn't invent this, neither did Zinzino. Let me assure you, I was working on omega-3 long before I'd ever heard of Zinzino. One of the fundamental things that creates a level of balance and process efficiency is the ratio that we have between omega-3, one of those polyunsaturated fatty acids, and omega-6. And these are called essential fatty acids. When we classify something as essential, what it means is two things. One, we have to have it. So the common understanding of the word essential. And secondly, it's essential that it's derived through the diet. The body cannot process this on its own. So this is where we look at our relationship with the land, with the planet that we live on, our interaction with that over countless years, and how we've fostered human health systems around food availability. Fiber is the same. Paleolithic humans consumed around about 100 grams of fiber per day. The average person now in the US consumes around about 15 grams. And that's brought a huge compromise to your gut and your gut microbiota. And so there were times when we lived closer to the land and off the land. And because of that, systems have developed around human nutrition and human nutritional health, whereby our intake, our consumption of omega-6 fatty acids and omega-3s work in this finely placed ratio. And what they do is that they look at cellular membrane flexibility. So we look at literally the quality of each and every single one of those human cells. And why this is important is because the ratio of these things, well, that influences how well you can get nutrients into the cell and waste products out of the cell. So I'm going to take a breath because I've given a lot of information, but I want us to just back a little bit. Most people think of nutrition in two simple terms. So they imagine the meal, they eat the meal, it goes into the stomach, into the gut, it gets absorbed, and the waste goes out. That's not the end point for nutrition. And maybe you know this. I'm just used to talking to lots of varied audiences. And so for some people, this is a eureka moment. The end point for your nutrition is each and every single one of the billions of cells you're made up of. Within every single cell that makes up your human body, there are mitochondria. They are the power plants of the cell. They are fueled by fat, carbohydrates, and proteins. So right at the heart of every single cell, the power plant that drives everything that we're about is fueled off the same things that we associate with a typical meal: carbohydrates, fats, proteins. It literally has to get to the cellular level. But bodies are so we're robust. You know, we are designed to not only thrive, but to survive. And what happens is year upon year, decade upon decade of nutritional compromise, the cell not really being optimized, dynamic, flexible, good cellular membrane, able to get that nutrition in, waste product out. Well, that just leads to a gradual decline and compromise over time. Remember, your cells are renewing on an hourly, daily basis. And a cell is a copy of the cell that came before it. We call them daughter cells or sister cells. So you have one cell that turns to 2, turns to 4, to 8, to 16, 32, 64, 128, 256. Blah, blah, blah. It proliferates out, and they're all a copy. And so what you get is a magnified copy of the cell. And if that cell has been compromised, well, then the double copy and the quadruple copy, well, that's living the same compromise. And over time, what happens is we deteriorate. There are people here whose faces I recognize, so you'll know I'm not a big fan of the term anti-aging. I think the term anti-aging is very much of our time because the problem we have is not aging. It's just that we age at a rate that is disproportionate to our biology. So you have what you call chronological age, and then you have biological age, and they become separated because of poor dietary choices, because of a lack of activity. We perceivably age at an accelerated rate, given how old we actually are. So biologically, we're not at the same point we should be chronologically. And we should be vibrant and thriving and active and engaging fully in the world for much longer than tragically nowadays the average person is. And so if we go back to some fundamental basics and get into the heart of this omega-3 cellular ratio, for me, it started in high performance sport. And I think that the benefits that it relates to in high performance sport are also benefits that relate to the average human. So let's have a look at a few of the areas that have a consensus around it. When you have a sufficient amount of omega 3, you get far more abundance of pro-anabolic microbe activity. So you get a better message that tells the body not only to repair muscle, preserve muscle, but to grow muscle. And that's really important, which I'll come back to in this notion of aging in a second. We also see a decrease in the amount of muscle breakdown. Now, in sport, this is really important. We've got athletes who are training sometimes twice a day, 7 days a week. And when there's a sufficient amount of omega 3, well, we get less muscle breakdown, but we get optimized muscle recovery and muscle growth. That is a huge marginal gain in sport. That's the golden chalice. That's the holy land. We also see a reduction of muscle soreness, and that's because of a control of inflammatory markers. That's really important in sport because if I have an athlete who is less sore, that means they're more prepared to train, which means they've got another opportunity to improve and to get those benefits with regards to that anabolic profile. We also see an increase in oxygen kinetics. So we see an athlete that can run faster, further for more frequent times. And we see an improvement in cognitive function and reaction time. Sport is all about decision making. Sport is all about being able to make the right choice under pressure at the right time. If it's in soccer, turn of a ball. If it's in football, it could be receiving a ball. You tell me the sport, and I'll tell you where reaction time and cognitive function come into it. But now forget that for the last 3 minutes I've been talking about sport and everything I've just said, and think about how that relates to just the average person living a normal life. So we get better preservation of muscle mass with lower cost to muscle overall. We have lower inflammation and lower soreness, so lower pain. We have better cognitive function. People who've got better cognitive function can make better choices, better reaction time. That's a factor of life. So sport is a magnifier. I started working in sport because I wanted to try and figure out the meaning of life. All I found out is that what happens at life at the fastest rate. And it relates to everything we do. When we look at omega 3, then in population health, and I'm now talking about the millions and billions of people who live on the planet, well, we see actually, I think, more profound impact. So that control of inflammation, the what we call chronic low-grade inflammation of the gut and systemic inflammation comes under control when there's a sufficient amount of omega 3. What we see is better, again, cardiovascular response. We see that if a person is above 8% total omega 3, they're in the lowest risk of category of risk for cardiovascular disease. And there's a ton of research that is looking at that now against other types of lifestyle pathology. And the same holds up. So we see that we actually reposition a human into lowest risk of lifestyle disease, which is the top four causes of mortality in the world. We start to see a person who's better at preserving, maintaining muscle mass. There are so many things I could discuss, but as I'm aware there's a lot of doctors on here today, the same is true in the USA as it is all over the world. The number one determinant of quality of life beyond the age of 65 is physical independence. Physical independence comes down to the preservation and utilization of lean muscle mass. You need to be able to get up out of a chair without assistance. You need to be able to go about your business, clean your home, manage the garden, go shopping, spend time with friends, play with your children, pick up your grandchildren, all those things. The number one determinant. But what do we see? We see more immobility. We see people who are engaging less in physical activity and exercise. And we see people where actually the notion of sarcopenia, age-related muscle mass, age-related loss of muscle mass, is accelerated, not because of age, because of lack of activation. That's the key factor here. So omega 3 is really where so many parts of the health equation come together. And now there will be someone, I would expect, would say, well, what about those areas of the world that never had a rich source of fatty fish? And obviously, we're talking about DHA and EPA, which either come from sea algae or it comes from, salmon, mackerel, bluefin tuna, anchovies. We know it. There have been indigenous populations that haven't consumed them. True. But any anthropologist will tell you, and any human nutritional anthropologist will tell you, that every study conducted has shown that those societies that thrived had high phytonutrient diets. So they managed that pathway in a different way. And then you have those coastal areas that thrived off actually both, particularly if you look at the key aspects of the Mediterranean diet. They had both access to fatty fish and they also had access to those phytonutrients. Now we live in a world of nutritional deficiency, poor amounts of phytonutrients, and near to non-existence of omega 3. So people say, okay, well, I'll just address the phytonutrients. Why? Why would you do that? When you have an option to do something really, really well, why would you ever choose to compromise that? I'm going to come back to what balance oil is in a minute because that's kind of the target in our philosophy, in our approach to addressing this. So I'll come back to that in a moment. But given that you know, and we do know, there's a huge amount of research evidence that supports this. We're at the point of consensus. Given that we know that omega-3 manages a pro-inflammatory pathway so effectively and has other benefits too, phytonutrients do the same, but in a slightly different way. Why would you go, I'm just going to do one? And actually, when you look at the statistics, the average person on earth does neither. Does neither. That's the truth. Most people are woefully low on both. Back home in Ireland, in the UK, lots of my medical colleagues who don't know anything about nutrition, they still will say to their patients, consume a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil every day. They know nothing about nutrition, but they will give them that guidance because we know how powerful that is with regards to the management of pro-inflammatory pathways. And we also know that olive oil is a gut primer, functions a little bit like a prebiotic. And so we know this works. It's been medically recommended for years, but most people still didn't do it. They just didn't take it on board. And then, where do we go next? Go into a supermarket, go into a grocery store, look at most of the so-called olive oils that are available. Last week I was in Athens. I was in Greece. When you're in Greece or when you're in Cyprus and these places, these are the homes of olive oil. And you go into a local store, they could access the very best olives and therefore olive oil. And I see all the same processed, interfered with bottles of oil everywhere. I digress. Let's get back on track. We know that a essential, non-negotiable factor of human nutritional health is modulation and management of those polyunsaturated fatty acids, omega-3 pathway, and the phytonutrients. I'm just going to sidestep a little bit because I should have done this at the start. There are different types of omega-3. You'll be aware of that. The key ones that are associated to the management of inflammatory pathway is EPA. And EPA is kind of arachidonic acids, AA, which is the omega-6. It's counterbalance. And when we measure ratio of omega-3, 6, we pitch those two against each other. Because now we'll drop down into a little bit of biochemistry. We know that it's actually those two. One is the pro-inflammatory as a part of the adaptive immune system, initiating consequences like B cell, T cell production through CD4 and CD8, and EPA, which is the resolution of the curve. So EPA, which is the omega-3, is the master conductor that says, okay, we've had that inflammatory response, brilliant. We're starting those repair mechanisms, but now let's control the system back down because unchecked inflammation is not good. It becomes a pathology of itself. So what we have when we have a human, a system that is primed with omega-6, there's plenty of omega-6 in the diet. Most people consume far too much because it's an inherent part of so many processed and ultra-processed foods. We have the immunological drive. It's like having your foot on the accelerator all the time. Go, go, go. And we know this. For those of you who are medical, who, like myself, had to adjust and respond to the COVID-19 back 5 years ago, we know what the problem was. It wasn't the virus, the SARS COVID-19 wasn't so bad, wasn't that exceptional. The problem was that we had so many people who had compromised immune function at the same time, and that virus took advantage of it. And so when we look at the role of these two, omega-6 doing its essential role, priming the immune system to any alert or needed response, initiating that cascade of CD4, CD8 into that B cell, T cell response and other factors, but no resolution, nothing to bring the calmness back down. And that's where the EPA comes in. DHA, and you will all know this. I mean, I still teach medical students. We teach this year one and year two. 60% of the brain is fat. 20 to 25% of that should be DHA. A big part of the research literature is focused on child development, early child development, years 1 to 4, and a compromise of omega-3 consumption at that point, and the consequences that has at the time and further down the road for fundamental cognitive development, the simple things to the more complex. We now have a world in which not only was the mother deficient in omega-3, which led to the child deficient in omega-3. And remember, whilst the mother is carrying the child is physiologically is the primary cause. And so any omega-3 that's consumed will go to the child. So it's limited reserve, reaching limited spaces. And then the child is born and is living on a diet of compromised omega-3 intake. So what do we have? We have children, we have adolescents, we have teenagers and young adults who've literally been starved of an essential nutrient all throughout their development years. And that turns into something quite dramatic when they're 21, 22, as now a fully matured adult. So this compromise in itself, can you get by? Will you age? Will you grow up? Can you do things? Yes, but never optimally. And also what you've done is you've established a blueprint that is going to carry you into adulthood that is based off this compromise. That's why we're in the state we're in now. It's one of the reasons why we're in the state we're in now. Also, omega-3 is another gut primer. So we know that omega-3 interacts positively within the gut, looking at that microbial activity. And when we start to look at certainly the transfer and communication within the gut, for instance, if we look at certain types of metabolic pathway, omega-3 is a signposter, same way as those phytonutrients are. So we've had a compromise to the gut by having insufficient amount of omega-3, a compromise to the gut by having an insufficient amount of phytonutrients, compounded by a compromise to the gut whereby the average person consumes less than the recommended amount of dietary fibers. So what do we have? We have the situation we're in now. It's not, will I develop a lifestyle condition or a metabolic disorder? It's when will I develop a lifestyle condition or metabolic disorder? And I'm only speaking in this term because I know how many doctors are on the call. I very rarely talk about it this way. I far more talk about preventative health in a more positively weighted way. Here are the things you can do to minimize your risk and to optimize your well-being. That's the message I share. I'm only happy to communicate it this way because of this specific audience, because we should get behind the positive message. But the reality is, there are pathological consequences to the way the average human eats nowadays, and we need to address those deficiencies. So I'm going to now jump into balance oil because one of the questions I saw popped up in the box, I haven't got the chat box open, but I did see this one come up. Why did I choose Zinzino? I feel like Zinzino chose me, but I was willing participant because I'm going to go all the way back now. If because I've got time, I'm going to go all the way back. So cast your mind back to the days of COVID, and this is April 2020, and the world is in shutdown. And I'm going to do this because I'm going to explain balance oil to you. But the world is in shutdown, and for me, I'm always honest about this. Um, Actually, the weather in the UK was fantastic. I'm in Dallas today, and the weather's beautiful. And at that point in the UK, we had weather similar to this: blue skies. It was nice and warm. I was at home, living in shorts and a t-shirt. I was getting used to life on Zoom. I had a shirt on standby, so the minute I went into a meeting, I would throw a shirt on, just like everybody else. And I was teaching my PhD students, my master's students. We'd all gone online. But I was at the same time, I was still a research coordinator for the Health Innovations group. And that was a collaborative project all over the world. And in the UK, in the Greater Manchester area, we had four universities who were a part of that initiative. We had Manchester University, University of Greater Manchester, Salford University, um, and we had the University of Bolton as well in there. So we had this, oh, sorry, MMU. We had these four institutes that were all in this one thing. And the Office of Global Burden had published a report in 2019, and it estimated that 6.3 billion people had an omega-3 deficiency. And this was based on meta-analyses. This was pooled data, looking at all those individual trials that had tried to quantify this, a lot of epidemiological work, saying what's the cost of the omega-3 deficiency from a health point of view. And so a research group had jumped up to say, how do we fix this? How do we fix this deficiency? And I was born in the 70s. My mum was a Dublinish, very proudly from Ireland. And my father was Scottish background. And we ate, home cooked meals. But my mother took a cod liver oil capsule every single day. And my mum was no nutritionist, but she was a cook, good Irish woman. She knew how to cook. But she would take this. And I'd worked in sport. In 2005, we'd been trying to crack the omega-3 code when it came to Manchester United Football Club, Liverpool, Everton. We were looking at nutritional strategies. We'd use supplementation. Nothing had ever worked. And I was scratching my head. I was going, why doesn't this work? My mum, who knew she could cook, but she was no nutritionist, even she knew she should take cod liver oil. Myself and some esteemed colleagues in 2005, we tried to supplement to no effect with some of the best footballers in the world. We couldn't change it. And now we've got this problem where 6.3 billion people are deficient and we can't give them all a fish. That's just not ecologically sustainable. It's cost prohibitive, it is unsustainable, there's no way. So I thought I need to go and look at the research. I need to look at the research around supplements and understand this better. I need to update. And this is 2020. And there had been a Cochrane review in 2018. And the conclusion of that review was that most available omega-3 supplements made no meaningful change. People would take them and there was no change. And I thought that was really interesting because I was always of the belief that supplementation should be intelligent, it should be targeted, it should have earned its place in a dietary strategy. And when it is that, it's essential. And then I was scratching my head because I went, we've got an essential nutrient that we can't get enough of through the diet. There's so many limitations around that. The vast majority of the world are now deficient in it. It plays an integral role in the overall control of systemic inflammation, cognitive development, cognitive function, but all these things. And I just couldn't understand what is going on. But I understood all the reasons why they didn't work. One, they would isolate the omega-3 from the fish or the algae, and it was highly sensitive to oxidation. So you've got this ongoing problem. Anytime you open the jar or bottle, oxygen gets in, it starts to degrade. Secondly, it doesn't survive the first pass. So the acid of the stomach devours over 50% of it for much the same reason. Then it gets into the gut where it's got this functionality like a prebiotic. So anything that's there, the gut has the first opportunity to utilize. And most people's guts are compromised. So if there's any element of omega-3, the gut is going to go fantastic. We'll have this. So it started to make sense to me. I could understand it as a chain of events, why you couldn't measure any difference from a standard supplement when it came to a cellular expression. So, and I promise you this is true now. This is going to sound like the most fantastical story you've ever heard, but it's true. There's a reason why the word coincidence is in the dictionary. I'm at home. It's a beautiful April day, working away, and my phone rings, and it's an old friend of mine. His name is Tony O'Neill, and at that time, he was like head of Europe for the clothing brand called Under Armour. You know who Under Armour are. They're from the US. And Tony and I gone back a long, long time. And he called me and he said that, he'd had a few health challenges before that. And he said that his doctor, who incidentally was over here in the States, had told him that he needed to supplement with omega-3 and said that the only company that he would recommend is a company from Scandinavia called Zinzino. And so Tony said to me, Colin, you're my nutrition guy. Will you have a look at this for me? And I said, listen, he said, what do you know about omega-3? I said, well, actually, I know quite a lot about omega-3. I said, but I also know most supplements just don't work. And we don't know why, but they just don't work. It doesn't get there. It should work, but it doesn't get there for much of what I've just explained. And Tony said, well, you have a look. He said, if you think it's rubbish, I won't take it. He said, but if you think there's something in it, he goes, I'm really interested. He said, and also, and this bit had nothing to do with me. But he said also, at that time, Under Armour was looking at direct sales as a model. It was interested in moving that way. And I said, well, Tony, I'll look at the omega-3, but I'm not going to give you business advice. And so I came off the call. Now, I promise you, I thought that looking at this company and giving him a response was going to take the next 5 minutes of my life. And that was it. I was just going to look at it, call him back up, say, yep, all the same, doesn't work. Here's why it doesn't work. Carry on with your life and do something different. But I went onto the webpage. This is a true story. Went onto the webpage, loaded up Zinzino, had no idea what that meant, still don't. Balance oil, and up popped this product. And I had a eureka moment. And I looked at this and I saw the omega-3 encapsulated in the olive oil and the vitamin D. And I had a real moment of going, hold on, this is too simple. Why has no one thought of this? Um, I actually thought, why have I not thought of this? And I'm not being arrogant, just wish I'd thought of it. And I remember staring blankly at the screen and going, this is too simple. Straight away, my mind was going, boom, 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 boom. This makes perfect sense. You encapsulate the omega-3 within a polyphenol, an olive oil. That's going to protect it from oxidation. Olive oil is a higher order prebiotic than omega-3, so the gut's going to make use of that. It's going to enable it to survive more intact through the first pass of the stomach. It's going to manage two pro-inflammatory pathways at the same time, and you're going to deliver a dose of vitamin D, which is immune supportive. And I just couldn't believe how simple and genius it was. And then I thought, well, I need to have a look at this. What's it made of? I looked at the ratio, the total amount of EPA and DHA, the total amount of polyphenol, which I couldn't believe. Because even based on my estimation, I was like, hold on, this is like five times at least higher phytonutrients than a really good olive oil. And I called him back and I said, Tony, this is really interesting. And I'm interested to know more about it. So I said, take it, start to do it. I'm really interested to know more about this and actually how they've come about doing this. The very next person I called was actually three people. were all friends of mine working in high performance sport. They're all heads of human performance in big clubs and organizations. And I said, "How are you getting on with that omega-3 that everyone's been working on?" "Nah, still no success." And I said, "I've got something really interesting." And I was literally on the phone saying, "Go to this website, have a look at this product." And I remember, I don't know a single person that's in Zeno. I'm at home in the UK, shorts, t-shirt, on my computer, and I'm speaking to some of my friends who are working with some of the biggest sports teams in the world, and I'm going, "Have you seen this? This is really interesting." And they were all going, how do we not know? So they started to make orders and reach out. They wanted to try this with their athletes. And over the course of the next 4 to 5 weeks, all that I saw and experienced and delving into it was this notion of, this is how you do it. This is how you address the omega-3 problem. You encapsulate the omega-3, you make sure you got the right blend, the right amount. I'll come back to that in a moment. You encapsulate that in a polyphenol, phytonutrient. You target both pathways at the same time. Body doesn't stand a chance. You're going to go into the desert and throw water everywhere. Of course, things are going to grow. This is fantastic. And then it started to catch fire. People jumping on board. People I knew. Tony is having great success with it. I've got friends of mine with their athletes going, "This is unbelievable. How do we speak to them? We want to start to set up direct deals with them." But because I'm a scientist and because I'm inherently skeptical, I still thought, yeah, but you know, this is good, but anyone can get lucky once. And I remember being a young man when all of this was actually black and not grey. And I was studying, and my nutrition professor saying to me that most multivitamin supplements are just expensive urine. They circulate, they go around the system and they go out, and that's it. So I thought, I'm going to catch them out because they'll have a multivitamin and it'll be expensive urine. And they've just been lucky with this one product. And so I went through the web pages and I found a product they have called Extend. And it was actually that moment, and you'll know this straight away when I explain it to you. I saw it, I loaded up the ingredients list and the formulation, and I looked down and I saw the one thing that made it stand out. And I realized then, I said, this is not a supplement company like I've ever come across before. They are doing it entirely different. And what did I see? Well, first of all, they didn't max out on every type of RDA, which is crazy because that's not food-like functionality. But I saw the beta glucan, and you'll all know beta glucan educates the immune system. It primes the immune system. It teaches it how to interact from innate to adaptive immune system. It's an immune primer, and that stops it from just circulating. Because what you've got immune activation and integration. So as you increase those amounts of B vitamin, C, D, all that good stuff, the body draws it down because the immune system is going through a trait. Like the immune system's in the gym. It's training, it's working out, and then you're providing the body with all the things it needs. But beta glucan and immune training induces no inflammation. So it's all good. It's all uptake. That was the moment I thought, this is unbelievable. This is incredible. And I'm going to go back a little bit further because prior to lockdown, I was actually over here again. I was in Philadelphia, 2019, October, and there was a conference on, and I was presenting at that conference. And I'll remember it for the rest of my life because at the end of the conference, I said to the room of people, we now live in an age of technological advancement that, people could never have imagined. As a species, we've got Paleolithic emotions, we've got medieval institutes, and we've got godlike technology in our pocket. So it's an interesting time to be alive. We know where processed food has gone wrong. It's not the technology, it's the application. Why isn't there a company in the world that is doing the moral, ethical thing, that is taking all that technology to produce things that are human enhancing rather than profit increasing? That's been done to death, literally. No pun intended. Why isn't there someone who's going, we can do this differently? We can actually apply this technology and we can do food better. And that thought stayed with me. And I wanted to finish my presentation of that event with that thought to provoke people. And then, 6 months later, I'm at home and I'm loading up this web page of a Scandinavian company who I'd never heard of. And I'm going through this whole notion of there they are. There they are. They're doing it right now. They're lending their intelligence and technology to producing supplements with food-like functionality. They are addressing real-world needs and providing real-world solutions. I'm mindful of time and there's not so much time left, so I'm going to go back to balance oil. Balance oil is not just the fact that it has the omega-3 and it has the high phytonutrient polyphenol plus the vitamin D. Balance oil is quite unique because the early research, the proof of concept, is a very, very clever man called Ola Ada, who'd spent his entire life working in food technology. He realized that in order for it to be fully functional, it had to be weight dependent on a dosage. You couldn't just say to somebody, take this pill and you'll have enough, because humans come in all different shapes and sizes. And what they'd very cleverly figured out was actually the ratio of 0.15 mil per kilogram body mass was the sweet spot with regards to how you could change somebody from being deficient, less than 4% as a total, to sufficient, above 8%. And then how that related to the ratio, which is that omega-6 to omega-3, which we want to be less than 5 to 1, ideally around about 3 to 1. And they realized that not only could you affect this change in a meaningful period of time, but you could measure this change using an interpretation of the well-established Trondheim test, which is the fatty acid profile blood test. And that to me is just was, and I go back now to before working for Zinzino, this was just such a rigorous, game-changing way to think about human nutrition, which would really start to get to the crux of how you can make a supplement intelligent, elegant, and food functionality. And so when people say to me, what is balance, what's your omega-3, what is balance oil? Balance oil is not omega-3. Balance oil contains omega-3. Balance oil is super high grade extra virgin olive oil, which has a proprietary ratio of EPA, DHA, omega-3. It is a fully functioning immune support product. And it's a lifestyle product because the same way as all those doctors would encourage their patients to take a tablespoon of olive oil every day, it's just saying, no, be more specific. Take a tablespoon of balance oil every day. And that's going to be game changing for the categorization of your health and well-being in the long term. Because instead of doing one, you're going to manage both pathways superbly. And instead of doing none, you're going to double up and do two. And so it's a really powerful, workable method. Shortly after that, I was approached because I'd done a lot of talks about omega-3 and dietary change and epidemiology and where we were at. And I was approached by Zinzino to come on board as a scientific research specialist, which I did. And I'm going to explain why in the time I've got left. As a researcher, even when I was a practitioner, so when I was working in the big district general hospital and as a researcher, I could change the lives of one or two people. With research, if I publish it or our team publishes it tomorrow, in about 10 or 15 years' time, there might be a ripple effect of that bringing about some change. When it came to joining forces with something like this, I knew I could affect global change on a day-to-day basis. That literally you could start to get involved, work direct, and change the health and well-being of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people all across the world all at once. You could really start to make a change. I never followed an academic path just so I could have fancy titles. I never did any of this just so I could buy a nice car. My motivation for this has always been the same, is to see how we can optimize human health, how we can fix the problem the generations before us have created. And that's the truth. It's not allocation of blame, it's just a reality. And through Zinzino, in these past 5 years, it's been remarkable the change that we've seen, the innovation that we've brought forward. Every time at an event, later today and tomorrow, I know for fact, hundreds of people will come up to me and they will say about the experience they've had by doing something so simple. And so when people say to me, why is Enzino? It's simple. It's because through that, it is the most powerful catalyst of change. We can deliver a clear message. We can give people a lifeline, a simple process, a simple habit to embed every day that is health transformation. So I'm aware that I've now spoke at you for 53 minutes, sorry, and there's a few questions in the box. So with the last few minutes that we have, I'll welcome any questions. I'll open up the box, shall I? Or does someone want to
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
seen that
So
one. So many blood thinners today. So first of all, we are going to do a talk next week, which I would encourage you all to listen to. It's called Meetings of Minds. It's for health practitioners. And we have Dr. Mike Lewis, who is a US resident himself, who's an incredible guy. And we're going to discuss heart health. And as a part of that, we're going to take a look at the latest research around this notion of blood thinning. And unless somebody is on a high dose prescribed blood thinner, there is zero consideration at all because the blood thinning effect of omega-3 have been overstated. So we know that actually there's very little impact. There are instances where someone should be careful. And with any of these things, I always encourage the individual to check with their doctor. But sometimes that worries me because sometimes the doctor doesn't know. But the reality is that the relationship between omega-3 and a prescribed blood thinner, the grounding for that argument has fallen apart. With every new piece of quality peer-reviewed evidence, that argument has fallen apart.
so are the fish oils or olive oils in the balancing oil more important? Are the fish oils or the olive oil in the balancing oil more important?
That's like saying which one's your favorite child. It doesn't matter. They're both combined. And that's a really, I apologize because that sounds like a really dismissive response.
So,
I'm going to answer it in a different way. If
mhm.
you said to me, I could only take one, the fish oil or the olive oil, which would I take? I would target the fish oil, but purely because I can get phytonutrients far more easily somewhere else. That said, the mechanism of action is that it's encapsulated. So the fish oil, and remember we have a vegan, which is derived from algae oil. So let's just say the EPA and the DHA are essential, and the phytonutrients, the polyphenol protects them. So it's such a smart way to go about it. But if you said to me, you can only keep one, I'd keep the omega-3s because I would address the phytonutrients somewhere else. But thankfully, I don't need to. It's all in one.
No. Another question, doctor. Since the product is in plastic, what about microplastics?
Yeah, so we take that really, really seriously. So we have it tested all the time and the whole BPA standard and the quality of that. And it's the lowest possible grade. We're going to start to publish those figures because understandably more and more people are interested. So we're going to start to publish those. The bottle itself is a huge part of what protects it because you can see the color of that bottle. So it protects it from any kind of direct light. So that helps to preserve the products that were in it. We don't use glass because if you look at the environmental debate around shipping of glass all over the world, the carbon effect of that is way worse than what we have with the bottle. That said, we have a huge sustainability project. We are looking to innovate within the area of those kind of things with our packages. And what I'll say is watch this space. We've got some interesting, exciting things coming up. But right now, that surpasses all of our requirements with regards to safety, efficacy, and particularly with those microplastics. We're all very aware of that.
And are there any heavy metals?
No, I mean that's a typical thing. That's why fish oil gets processed. That's the reason. And our ambition going forward, remember, is that we want to eliminate the fish part of it. We want to be able to derive it all from the algae. We want to have a sufficient economy of scale whereby we're not reliant on having this impact on the sea or that part of it. And we're being very proactive on that. So we're making really advances in that area. But the whole part of the fish process and part to extract the oil is to eliminate the metals.
And could you explain the similarities or differences between the balance oil and the capsules?
I mean, the capsules really, some people just don't like drinking oil. They don't like it. You know, oil can be quite rich on the stomach. We always encourage people to take their oil with a meal to minimize that. And actually, it probably helps a little bit with absorption, even though it has a high bioavailability anyway. And particularly in sport, you know, as someone who spent 30 years in sport, athletes would rather come in, take a capsule, drink of water, and then on the way, you know, than take the oil. The capsules are really travel friendly. I've got some in my case. You know, I don't check in luggage, so I can only take what I can put into a case. So I take them when I'm traveling with me. So they're far more practical from that point of view. It addresses it if someone really doesn't like the oil, and that's where it has its part. You know, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to anyway. I would always encourage the oil, the bottle first, and if you don't get along with that, then you've got the option of the capsule.
And would you take a random fish oil and a random olive oil together to get a similar effect?
No, but it's really funny that you say that because there's a guy in Greece who's quite high profile, you know, influencer, my least favorite group of people. And he decided to do that. He said, "Hey, we're in Greece. We've got the best of olive oil, and I'm going to do that." And it's been hilarious. Every test he's done has failed magnificently. It's hilarious. So no, it doesn't work the same way. The encapsulation, and remember, it's all cold press encapsulation. We have pre-harvested, you know, the phytonutrients in our olive oil is quite unique. The standard olive oil is 5 times what you'd see in a good olive oil. We have a proprietary blend of the omega-3, the DHA to EPA, because we know how it interacts better from a functional point of view. So it's not just a case of doing this, but I have enjoyed watching him try and fail so magnificently. Yeah.
And doctor, is there a right or wrong time to take the balancing oil?
Yes. Wrong time is before exercise. Definitely, because your body will use it as a substrate, and there won't be a sufficient amount then for it to be active. A great time to take it if you exercise is take it after you've exercised with your recovery meal. That's a good time to take it, and otherwise be consistent. So try and target a time. So let's say you're going to take it every day with your lunch, then be consistent every day with your lunch. Take your balance oil because then you're optimizing that 24-hour curve. So they're the best advice. But if you're going to exercise, take it afterwards with your recovery meal.
Great. Um, if someone has low cholesterol, will this further lower their total cholesterol?
There's been really good studies. So we've partnered with the University of Bath to look at some more epidemiology and the lowering of cholesterol. So not as a total. And why would anyone want to lower it as a total? Because we all know that that was a red herring, but as a ratio. So it has a positive influence on the ratio of LDL to HDL. That's the important thing. Because we know total amount of cholesterol, a huge amount of that is, you know, genetically inherited, huge variation between person to person. And remember, for those men on here and the ladies, but you know, primarily men as they age and get past the age of 40 and they wonder where the testosterone has gone. Cholesterol is a testosterone primer. True for you ladies too. Remember, you have a greater total amount of testosterone. It's just that it's offset by the estrogen and you know, other factors. So we don't want to dampen total cholesterol. We just want the ratio to be right, as with all things biological. And we see a huge positive influence on that ratio of LDL, HDL with consistent use.
Awesome. I think this is the last one. Does freezing cold in shipping in winter affect the oil?
I mean, because cold, it's stable. It's a stable product and it's cold pressed. Um, you know, when you talk about freezing cold, are we talking about environmental freezing or literally freezing the product?
Okay. And there's
Um,
some. Mhm.
it's a stable. I mean, what I would say, um, it's a stable product, particularly with regards to temperature, especially to the cold. Heat is always more of a concern when it comes to those things. And we take great care from a logistical point of view to prevent any of that interaction. And the best thing is how you care for it when it's home, is keep it in a cool, dark place. Once it's been opened, keep it in the fridge until you finish the bottle.
Okay. And the lanolin is, as the vitamin D source is interesting. Can you talk about why you use that?
Well, you always have to make a technical decision. And the reason why we use that is because you have to start to look at It'd be really good if you could just put whatever you want in any kind of capsule, pill, powder formulation, but you can't. You've got to start to look at what's going to make for the smoothest blend and mix, what's going to have the best interaction with the other actives in it. And that was the one. That was the one. There's a lot of technical decision making. I came from a human nutrition background and a physiology background. And, the steep learning curve for me when I joined Zinzino was actually, thankfully we've got amazing product developers, was looking at that technical factor. It's not just a simple case of put what you want in. You've really got to look at those technical factors as to what creates a synergy, what gives you the texture, the taste, as well as delivers the active. And that was the best one.
And is there a difference between half a dose twice a day and a full dose once a day?
No, half a dosing twice a day is completely fine. It's total amount that matters most.
Can a young child, how young can a child be to take the oil?
Oh, this is the question that we get asked. I'd say, we've got really good guidelines because childhood ratios and values are different as well. But certainly once they're onto soft foods, they're fine. Yeah, it's all about um, like their capacity to swallow it. And so that's the key part of it. And if you can mix it into something they've got as a soft food on the soft food palate at a young age. And actually the key part is that DHA and EPA are hugely beneficial for childhood development. So the key thing is that it's there.
I believe Dr. Hahn is asking, can this product be used with people with active cancer?
It depends. I'll have to make this the last question because I've just seen the time.
Yes.
I do apologize. And it depends. Oncology, cancer is an umbrella term, and it depends on the specific type. So it's always advisable that you speak to your oncologist. And the reason I say that is because one, there could be a contraindication to the certain types of medication that you are on. And secondly, if you start to look at certain types of cancer, um, it could be that whilst that condition is being managed, they don't want you to take any kind of high dose supplementation at all. So I would never say, just take it. Speak to your oncologist. At the same time, and I do a lot of work in the area of cancer back in the UK, the majority of the time, it's going to be fantastic and it's going to help to support you during treatment and your recovery. But speak to your oncologist. Make sure there's no risk of contraindication.
Doctor, it's been a pleasure having you on. We are going to have these lunch and learns every Thursday at 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. We would welcome you back when your schedule does allow. We've had a lot of interest here, you can see. And thank you all to all the doctors and everyone else that have joined on today. If you're interested in actually carrying Zinzino in your practice, there's an amazing plan for that, and we'd love to ask you to get back with the person who invited you today, and they can actually delineate with you how to go about that. So, with that, Doctor, somebody mentioned on the comments, you don't have to have a big title to be a leader. I know everybody's really enjoyed your just how you've delivered your information today. So, thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
with
Thank
that,
you.
great. Any ending words?
No, just that, I'll take the opportunity just to say this before I go. It's always a privilege to do these things, and I'm in a very privileged position where I get to speak with people like you because the reality is, and I take this really seriously, my duty of care is to make sure that what we do stands up to what it promises, so that people like you, actually within the heart of your community, are empowering such a huge change. And so I never like to miss the opportunity to thank you all because you are very much what it's all about. Without you, we can't facilitate change and improvement anywhere. So on behalf of Zinzino and 100% on behalf of myself, thank you all for all that you do. It is a privilege. Thank you very much.
Oh, great. Well, in the 1.6 million people that have been tested, to say that we have a 95% success rate in getting people back in balance in 4 months is pretty amazing. And that's what really turned my head. I know that. So, again, a pleasure having you on. And thank you, everyone else, for joining on today. We'll have the recording and have a blessed day, Doctor.
Thank you. All the best. See you soon. Bye now.
Blessings, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.